guys, let's talk about books. Welcome back to my 5 Reads series where I talk to you about 5 books that I read recently and gush all over them and probably miss important information, and we just have a grand old time. The rest of the playlist will be linked up here and in the description, and we should just get on with it. The first one for this video is one that I picked up on holiday a couple of months ago, but I've been meaning to read since it came out because there was such hype. But also it was only in digital format, and I thought that it was beyond my price point of what I was comfortable to pay for a digital copy of a book that ultimately I don't own. So when I was on holiday and I could justify the extra cost, I bought the physical version, and that is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky. The thing that tipped me over was Ariel Bassett mentioned on her Patreon podcast that she had read it, or her one of her podcasts, that she had read it and loved it and devoured it in an afternoon, and you can see why. It's only 150 pages long. It was great and I loved it, and I'm not sad that I sat on it because, like I said, I wasn't willing to pay that money, but also I'm sad that I missed out on the conversation when it was a new and talked about book, because it is very sweet and very cozy, and if you're looking for something in that cozy genre, which is becoming more popular, this is fantastic. This is the story of sibling Dex, who is a non-binary character who is a tea monk. They leave the role that they're doing in their society. They don't have paid jobs. They talk about it more in the second book, but they exchange goods and services for a token, and then you can spend that token in exchange for a good or service, or by performing the services, you receive tokens. So sibling Dex gives up what they're doing as a gardener to become a tea monk, and they take a wagon around the planet, the country, to basically be like a wandering cancelling service. So Dex will take their wagon and set up the tea service, and people will come up and tell Dex anything that's on their mind, and then Dex will make them a cup of tea, and then they can sit quietly at the wagon on cushions and take as long as they need. And this is acceptable in this society. This is a society that has centuries ago broken away from technology. They had factories and robots, and the robots gained sentience, and so they decided they'd split the planet in half of the humans, half of the robots, and the robots area has become rewilded, and humans don't go there. But Dex has this feeling in their soul that they need to go into the wilderness. So eventually they go into the wilderness and they meet a robot called Mosscap. And that is why the series is called Monk and Robot. There are high stakes, but it doesn't feel dire at any time. It's more of a, what the fuck am I doing here and why does it matter kind of book, and ultimately it doesn't matter, so do you. And it's fantastic. And it was published in 2021 in the COVID times, where I think we all had that epiphany of just do you. What else can I say? There is a second one, A Prayer for the Crown Shy, which I have read and will be in my next video. Next up is another one that I wish I had got on the hype train when it first came out, but again, I wasn't paying full price ebook prices for what I would consider a novella. This one is also, I think, 150 pages, which to me is not a real book. Yeah, like that's half a book. So when this one came on a Kindle Daily Deal for only $1, I bought it, and then I bought the physical version so that I could have the physical versions of the rest of them, because I finally read the first of the Murderbot Diaries. This is All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This one came out in 2017. So this is the story of a security unit who doesn't have a name but calls itself Murderbot because of an incident in the past where it massacred humans. It's a hybrid, it's a cyborg, it's robotic parts and organic parts, and although this incident was wiped from its robotic parts, it can't be erased from its organic parts. So it has some recollection of what happened, but because security units cost so much, the company that owns it has just wiped it as much as it can and then rehired it out to a new expedition on a different planet. Murderbot in the meantime has hacked its governor module so that it can't be externally controlled. So when it gets these instructions from the company and instructions from the human, it can make the decision not to follow those instructions. Although, in order to avoid being completely wiped and start from scratch, it plays along. And it reaches a point in this book where it becomes obvious that having hacked the governor module is going to save everyone's life, but at the same time expose Murderbot. How does it feel? How does it cope with the humans? How does it cope with feeling its feelings? Fantastic. Absolutely loved it. Definitely gives me the vibe that I want to go back and play Fallout 4 because of that robotic element. Absolutely, I am on the Murderbot hype train now. So I think I said this came out in 2017. I've got 2 of the follow-up novellas. I think there's 7 in total at the moment, including 2 novels. But I'm definitely keen to read more Murderbot. Lots of fun. The next one is A Little History of Science by William Bynum. This is the second of the little histories that I have read. They're published by Yale University Press and they're designed for a younger audience. The language in this one was pitched quite young, I would say high school, quite simple language. But sometimes, and I need simple language to get my head around big concepts, big science and maths concepts, because my brain just, it can't. It does that meme where it's like all the symbols over her confused head, and that's literally me when it comes to numbers and maths and big thinking like that. So it was nice to have this, and I did learn some things, but at the same time, it was very simple. Like, can I have it both ways? No, I don't think so. The books in this series take 1 chapter to explain a big concept, and the chapters are about 5 pages. So I've been reading this and other books in this series in like the 10 minutes I have before I have to go to work, or, you know, when I get 10 minutes of sitting down, not having to talk to people time. Would I recommend it? I mean, yeah, it was fine. It did the job of giving an overview of science, and like I said, I learned some things. I read this one in particular for the Dewey Decimal Challenge that I was participating in last year. This was the last one I had to achieve. I put science off till last. It's in the 500 categories. The call number is 509, which is history of science. And I'll tell you what, I did learn something in the very first introduction. They're talking about the Babylonians and where our history of science begins, because history is only the written records of humans. So before we have evidence of written records, that's prehistory, even though there were humans before. It starts with Babylonians, and it says here, Babylonians said there should be 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle, and 7 days in a week. I didn't know that's where those numbers came from, so that was cool. Right on page 3. The rest of it, I kind of already knew, and like I said, pitched for a younger audience. But it got the challenge ticked off, and that's what I was looking for. Next up was a reread for me, and this was a 5-star reread. That is Leviathan Wakes by James S. A. Corey. This is the first in the Expanse series. There's 9 books in the Expanse, plus a collection of short stories. And I essentially bullied 2 of my friends into reading it because they had not. One had seen the TV show, one hadn't, and so when they were buddy reading it on Storygraph, I just barged in. Why not? This one was published in 2011. It is a hybrid of a detective noir story solving a mystery and a band of adventurers on a quest. They're solving the same thing. The quest is the same. They're just coming at it from different angles. And ends up, the 2 main POV characters are James Holden, who is our leader of the adventurers. He is eternally optimistic and naive and basically a holy fool. Like, he just rushes in, doesn't think about the consequences, and assumes that he can solve the problem, assumes that it will be okay if only everybody has all the info and it's all fair and equitable. And then the other POV character is Josephus Miller, who is a detective on a planet that is colonized by humans, but they're second class, third class citizens. They are under the thumb of both the humans of Earth, who are consider themselves superior, and then the humans of Mars, who are second only to Earth. They're in a Cold War. So Miller comes from the oppressed class. He is cynical as fuck. And so putting the two together is fantastic because they hate each other from the get-go. But they eventually solve the mystery, which is to do with a girl called Julie. What else can I tell you about The Expanse? It is a mystery about an extrasolar life form. They call it the protomolecule after the company that's looking into it, Protogen. And because it's not sentient, humans are trying to harvest it as a weapon, obviously. This is all against the backdrop of Earth versus Mars versus the belt and the politics behind it, the politics of colonization, the politics of oppression and exploitation. And it goes on to be fantastic in a different way. The first one definitely is this space opera detective noir solving the mystery. There's none of that going forward. There's more, what the fuck is this protomolecule and how do we stop it being exploited to the detriment of everyone? My buddies are going to continue on the series, so I will probably be rereading more. But I absolutely love this one. I love coming back to the Rocinante, which is what they named the ship that they steal from Mars. I love that the science in here is not supposed to be a hard science fiction. They just wave their hands enough to make it seem cromulent and then you believe. I love that there's more questions than answers in this first one, but the further you go in the series, the more answers you get. It's so much fun. I love this book. And finally, on my Kindle is an outlier. I talked to my Sword and Lacer group about sharing book suggestions for Christmas because we couldn't do a physical book swap. We're all over the world. And somebody recommended this book, The Fisherman, which they described as sad dudes having a sad time on a fishing trip and then Lovecraftian shenanigans ensue. And I thought my friend Luke would love this book. So we buddy read it. It's a horror, which I don't enjoy usually. This is The Fisherman by John Langan, which came out in 2016. Apparently it won awards or was nominated for big horror awards, like what is that, the Bram Stoker and the Shirley Jackson, that kind of horror awards, which I'm not familiar with at all. The recommendation was don't read the description, just go in cold. So I did, but there will be spoilers here in this review. So if you don't want reviews, this is the end of the video. Goodbye. All right, let's proceed. This is Guy, Abe, and straight up his missus dies of cancer. She's diagnosed just after their honeymoon. It's all very sad. He's a sad guy. He makes friends with this guy at work called Dan, whose family was killed in a car crash that he survived. He's a sad dude having a sad time. And they just go fishing together, and that's their solace. They don't really talk, they just fish. Then Dan gets super obsessed about going to fish at this one particular spot. So they head out that way, but it's pouring. So before they head out to this lake that's barely on a map, they head to a diner. And the guy who runs the diner, I think his name was Harold, he's like, you don't want to go there. And then you get Harold's story. And Harold's like, you know, when I was a kid, I'd talk to this woman. And no, he talked to a priest, and the priest talked to this woman who lived here at the time. And this is her story. And then you get her story. So it's story within a story within a story. But that central story is the horror Lovecraftian element. It was great. I really enjoyed that. It was set, I want to say like the 20s with migrant families from Europe. And they'd come to build a dam in upstate New York. I can't remember the details. Anyway, weird things happen. And then we come back out of those stories and Dan still wants to fish at this river. So off they go. And they run into the same things from this story, which of course you know is going to happen. The joy of this was buddy reading it with my friend because we were like, you know, don't go here, don't go there, don't have sex with your dead fish wife. It was fantastic. So in that respect, I really enjoyed it. As a horror, It was probably fine. It's my cat climbing the front door. Would I have read this by myself? Absolutely no. The sad dudes having their sad time with their dead wives. And there were so many dead wives. It was becoming farce at that point. But it came together. The buddy read helped me get through it. And it was perfectly fine. Yeah, it was bleak. But that story within the story definitely helped my enjoyment of the tale as a whole. Abe and Dan were not fun. So once again, spooking buddy reads. They are so much fun. That actually wraps up my reading for 2023 as well. The Fisherman was my Christmas Eve read, but I didn't end up finishing anything between Christmas and New Year because I didn't have time off between Christmas and New Year. I work in retail. It's been hectic. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you in the next one.